Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Steve, for the introduction. Thank you, Rose, for allowing me and asking me to be here today. It's nice to be in Georgia. It's a great fall, break from our fall weather in Michigan. It's much warmer here when I got off the plane than it was when I left. So, my talk today will be titled Black Women in Sport Leadership Research Imperatives. Okay. So let's begin with understanding where Black women are situated within sport leadership research. First, it can be difficult to find information about Black women in sport leadership research because sport leadership research typically aligns along two paths. First, along gender, which typically highlights the experiences of white women, and secondly, along race, which typically highlights the experiences of Black men. Therefore, Black women's sport leadership experiences are oftentimes interpreted through the gaze of white women or Black men. So the purpose of this presentation is first to examine sport leadership research trends, discuss research imperatives that may be better situated to highlight Black women's sport leadership experiences, and lastly, explore empowering and engaging methods or modes of collecting data, methodologies or the theoretical perspectives or bridges that connect our philosophical standpoint about research and our data collection methods, and lastly, theories and conceptual frameworks. So what is research? And according to Zora Neale Hurston, research is formalized curiosity. It is poking and prying with a purpose. So now that we understand what research is, have an understanding of where Black women are situated within sport leadership research, let's start looking at trends. And to begin, we'll examine sport leadership research trends in gender and sport. So first, this is not an exhaustive list of methods and methodologies and theories and conceptual frameworks that have been used within gender and sport leadership research. I just highlighted a few to talk about today. So one is the use of surveys or secondary data. And the methodologies tend to be more quantitative, leading to more generalizable and standardized results. And some theories and conceptual frameworks, role congruity theory, gender ideology, and of course, feminist theory. But there are some limitations within gender and sport leadership research. So certain framings of femininity and womanhood may traditionally portray women as docile and supportive, which are often characteristics that are associated with white women. And these framings help to reinforce ideas that women are inferior in sport as leaders. And this may also constrict and leave Black women out of the conversation as they may be defined by elements of their race. So now let's look at some trends in race and sport leadership. Again, these are just examples, not an exhaustive list. So some methods tend to be questionnaires and surveys. Methodologies, mixture of quantitative and qualitative, but they do tend to be more generalizable in their results. And some theories and conceptual frameworks are critical race theory and human and social capital. Again, though, this leads to limitations for Black women. And certain framings reinforce the idea that Black people are starting at a deficit and need to gain more skills and knowledge in order to be leaders. And this research tends to highlight Black men's experiences, which again may also be constricting and leave Black women out of the conversation as they may also be defined by their gender. So overall, race and gender sport leadership research experience limitations because they oftentimes don't acknowledge the racialized gender that Black women experience. So there is a need to situate Black women's experiences because of the historic devaluation of Black womanhood, the impact of sexism and racism on Black women, and Black women's overt and covert exclusion within gender and racial equality movements. Which now leads us to race and gender sport leadership research. Again, these are not, and this is not an exhaustive list, it's just examples of some of the methods, methodologies, and theories that have been used in this line of research. So the methods have been interviews and surveys. They've been a mixture of both qualitative and quantitative. Some examples of theories and conceptual frameworks include identity conflict, which are the conflicts that happen between, my notes. The conflicts that are between your identity and stereotype-based expectancies and judgments. Identity negotiation, which are the processes through which people establish, maintain, and change their identity depending on the environment that they are in. And Black feminist thought. So as this area of research already considers the intersections of race and gender, I argue that there needs to be a further expansion of research imperatives in this area. And important research imperatives include intersectionality and the use of more standpoint theories, and more empowering and engaging methodologies and methods. So to start, intersectionality. So intersectionality refers to particular forms of intersecting oppressions. And it is well situated to help us understand and analyze the human experience. But intersectionality is not simply about identities, but about how institutions use identities to exclude and privilege certain individuals. So therefore, the better we understand the racialized and gendered factors and elements of power that impact sport leadership research, the better equipped we are to conduct research that highlights Black women's leadership experiences. Additionally, Collins and Bills offer 6 core dynamics of intersectionality to help in understanding analysis. I'm only going to highlight 3 as it relates to my presentation. The first being social context, which helps us to understand or contextualize experiences through specific historic, intellectual, and political contexts. Second, social justice, which acknowledges that power and privilege are not distributed equally and fairly. And third, power, which can be exercised personally, culturally, or structurally, and these domains of power may work independently or interdependently. These dynamics often interact for a broader and allow for a broader understanding, which pushes us to 1, address the multiple factors that simultaneously affect Black women, to center the experiences of Black women, and to examine and address the impact of power dynamics. Intersectionality leads itself to understanding people's experiences from their specific standpoint, a person's group location and hierarchical power relations, which produces common challenges for individuals within those groups. The 2 I chose to highlight today are Black feminist thought, and I'll discuss the tenets and oppositional knowledge, Black feminist thought as an oppositional knowledge, and its contributions to sport leadership, and also the theory of darkened feminism, and again, I'll discuss the tenets and its contributions to sport research. So Black feminist thought rests on some core tenets. First, consciousness as a sphere of freedom, or the sites that Black women have created which offered safe spaces that allow Black women to construct new meanings to resist certain controlling images of Black womanhood. Next, culture of resistance. Black women's ability to draw on their own cultural resources to resist oppression. Next, self-empowerment. The ability for Black women to take control of their lives and believe in themselves. Self-definition. The ability for Black women to define who they are for themselves. Motherhood, which encompasses biological motherhood and the idea of other mothering, which refers to caregiving practices that Black women express regarding care for their non-biological children, or i.e. community mothering. And lastly, ethic of caring, seeking to bridge the disconnect between intellect and emotion and acknowledge that knowledge is not free of individual values. Additionally, Black feminist thought is posited as an oppositional knowledge. Black feminist thought as an oppositional knowledge, again, recognizes the knowledge that Black women possess. It is seen as a counter to dominant narratives. It analyzes unjust practices that confront Black women, and it builds new knowledge while also builds new knowledge and stimulates new practices. So, some contributions from Black feminist thought to sport leadership research. First, research that emphasizes safe spaces where Black women can speak freely are a necessary condition for Black women's resistance. Research that acknowledges the importance of relationships, especially with other Black women, and this is throughout the research process as well. Research that embraces Black women's culture of resistance, self-definition, and self-empowerment. Research that champions oppositional knowledge. And lastly, research that offers a lens by which to conceptualize and empower Black women by highlighting the collective knowledge that they possess. So let's talk about Endarkened feminism, which is not a very common standpoint theory, and is one that I discovered when I was in my doctoral journey. Endarkened feminism also stands on some core tenets, which are similar to the ones that of Black feminist thought. But Endarkened feminism, one, places Black women again at the center of discussions. It posits research as responsibility. It focuses on raising awareness of power relations. It provides guidance to better recognize the validity of Black women based on a given set of assumptions, which I'll discuss next. And it challenges the prevalent idea that there is a unitary way of knowing. And challenging this prevalent idea that there is a unitary way of knowing is important in the context of sport leadership, since there has been a dominant way of knowing for years. So the assumptions of Endarkened feminism. First, self-definition forms one's participation and responsibility to one's community. Researchers have a responsibility to members of their community, and there needs to be a collective refusal to be defined by others. Second, research is both an intellectual and a spiritual pursuit, a pursuit of purpose. So therefore, there is a relationship of reciprocity and care, vulnerability during the research process, and the researcher's sense of self is also linked to a sense of purpose. Third, only within the context of community does the individual appear, and through dialogue continue to become. So dialogue is key to assessing knowledge claims. Next, concrete experiences within everyday life form the criterion of meaning, the matrix of meaning making. So happenings of everyday life within community are critical components of meaning making with two underlying aspects, wisdom and knowing. Fifth, knowing and research extend both historically in time and outward to the world. To approach them otherwise is to diminish their cultural and empirical meaningfulness. And according to Dillard, Endarkened feminism acknowledges and pushes against the absence of Black women in historically guided research, systems of knowledge production, and the meanings and legitimacy of the research process. And lastly, Power relations manifest as racism, sexism, homophobia, etc., and structure gender, race, and other identity relations within research. So in order to address these issues, context of power must be addressed. So some highlights of In Darkened Feminism and contributions to sport leadership. First, again, Black women are seen as the center and not as an aside to explorations of race and or gender in sport. 2, it is socially responsible and translational research that helps illuminate the intersections of race and gender. Third, it is research that is examining the different power dynamics within sport. The research in sport practically and theoretically validates Black women's ways of knowing by relying on their lived experiences. And last, it is research in sport that continues to challenge the notion that there is a unitary way of knowing. So next, empowering methodologies and methods. So the idea of qualitative methodologies. Those that are interpretive, which assume that the social world is constantly being constructed through group interactions, or critical, that also view the world as an ongoing construction, but goes further to suggest, again, that power dynamics help to shape social reality. And through their data collection methods. Again, this is not an exhaustive list of all methodologies that could fall under this, but just an example. Interviews, which can help create dialogue and conversation, narrative inquiry, oral histories, ethnographies or field research, and grounded theory. And then engaging in empowering and engaging analysis. So working through an iterative analysis process. And it's shown here in a circular motion, but an iterative process simply means that you can go between each quote unquote step throughout the research process. So you would gather your data, you would begin reviewing and exploring it and identifying themes. From there, you could begin to examine the data further and begin coding your data, all while memoing and journaling, to again help you come up with more themes. Then you would revise coding. And an iterative process is not necessarily generalizable or standardized. And importantly, it acknowledges the role of the researcher. And the role of the researcher is important, and I argue it's necessary to include Black women in this research process throughout, particularly in the role of researcher. One, because the role of the researcher is so critical because their beliefs and their values help to guide the topic of study. So it is imperative that Black women continue to engage in research on Black women's sport leadership experiences as they are able to add additional context to the research process. They're not operating from a completely outsider perspective, because they are better able to build rapport and relate to the participants because of a collective understanding of moving through the world as a Black woman. And when thinking about this is important because Black women in the role of a researcher may also lead to engaging analysis that is action and solution oriented, which can be emancipatory for both the researcher and the research participants. That engages in a collaborative model of research that includes the research participants in various phases of the research process, like participatory action research. It has a goal of social activism. It acknowledges power dynamics within the research process and throughout. And it can help introduce practical implications and solutions. Excuse me. So since Black women's sport leadership experiences are qualitatively different from those of white women and Black men. And engaging and empowering research imperatives are needed to better elucidate Black women's sport leadership experiences. Standpoint theories are necessary to help center Black women's experiences within sport leadership research. Because as a woman in one of my studies explained, Black women are a force and they have unique talents, and sport would be a better place if more Black women were present. Therefore, the Sport Academy needs better and richer research on Black women in sport leadership. The sport industry needs better and richer research on Black women in sport leadership. And Black girls and women who are aspiring sport leadership positions need better and richer research on Black women in sport leadership. Thank you. So I've been working on some papers that expand from my dissertation, which specifically looked at Black women in collegiate athletic leadership, and from an organizational critique. So the argument that I made was that Black women are already empowered with all of the things that they need to be a leader. There are structural constraints to them being able to access those roles. So I created a model, the Sport Intersectional Model of Power, or SIMP model, that looked at three main areas. So recruitment and hiring practices, the idea of diversity resistance, or people within organizations being resistant to diversity, and the concept that legitimate power or positional power is tied to whiteness and maleness. And so doing work with expanding the model. So from my dissertation, I had to make a few adjustments to my model. So working on expanding that, working on this presentation that I just did, so research imperatives, a review, like more of a literature review, so thinking about what has been done already and then how we can further progress the work on Black women in sport leadership. And yeah. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yeah, I want to see you, Lauren.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you have any plans to disseminate your research to organizations, like you mentioned colleges, but maybe professional teams or Olympic committees? What are your plans, if any, to kind of get your research out there so it doesn't just, sit and, yeah.
Research. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. Excuse me. I'm a big proponent of research should be used for practical things. So I would love to get at least, particularly the research I'm working on with the model that I created specifically to organizations, collegiate, professional. I think just about every sport organization could use it. So particularly that research I would love to get pushed more practically in order to have organizations think about how structurally there are things that we have societally built in to how we conduct our workday, to who that was built around, because that wasn't built around Black women, and how things like that we think as quote unquote normal can actually be limitations to some people. So I would love to get specifically that line of research pushed out to have a practical use.
Very good. Any other questions? We have plenty of time left. Now is the time to ask. You have another question, Lauren? You look like you.
I'll do a follow-up. Have you been able to collaborate with any other maybe Black women that are studying leadership, or what are your plans for expanding your studies?
So outside of my work with my advisor, I have not gotten the opportunity to collaborate, but I'm very open to it. And I don't know. I don't think I've actually given thought to what my plans would be to make that happen, but now is a good time. So I guess now, after this, I'll go home and think about ways to kind of work on figuring out collaboration with other people.
Great presentation, very eye-opening. So just in light of recent events, especially with in the media when it comes to some social issues, so one thing that was really popular was a lot of businesses stood in solidarity with Black men and women. And I know quite a few organizations released statements saying that, they would try to improve hiring practices, they would try to release policies to better get more Black individuals in these organizations. So from a sports standpoint, did you notice any increase maybe in Black women and leadership positions in sport organizations, or do you think this research can help give those practitioners more information on okay, the research is here, maybe we should do this hiring, this recruitment for X, Y, and Z reasons? Do you think your research or research in this area can help solidify those decisions and kind of speed up those decisions in the future?
Yeah, I would hope that my research can help kind of guide that work. One of the things I did within my dissertation was use my model as an intervention. So thinking about how to use research to help make more inclusive and equitable hiring practices, right? So thinking about stuff like that. My hope, and what I think tends to be a recent trend, and what I hope kind of doesn't stay necessarily as a trend, is solely positioning Black women within chief diversity officer roles of DE&I, right? Which are great and very important, but that is not the only thing that Black women are capable of doing within sport organizations, right? Their leadership is vast and beyond that. So I would hope that I have seen an increase in that regard as a way to kind of show that they're doing that and hiring, which is nice, but also just having someone present, having diverse people in a space does not therefore make it inclusive and equitable, right? So we need to be able to build inclusivity within an organization before those people even get there, so that they feel welcomed and then will want to stay within the space that they have just been invited to. And so, yeah.
All right, and we actually have a question coming in from YouTube. So Kyra is asking, do you feel that your research could inform SAP businesses on their hiring practices to avoid tokenism in roles, not positioning Black women in certain roles to check boxes?
So I would hope, that is the goal of my research, right? Is to, one, help prevent tokenism, because we know of the mental and also can be sometimes physical effects of tokenism that they can have on people of color within spaces, right? And so like I mentioned, the recent influx in hiring Black women to have diversity-related roles oftentimes means that they are the only executive leadership present in a space. And so the goal is to kind of my research, I hope, can kind of push back on that, right? And help to expand the bounds of what we think leadership looks like, so that when we think of leadership and a leader, we think of Black women, period, right? Not just for certain types of leadership, not just for certain spaces, but for leadership in general.
Hi, and this is, it's not really a question, but more of a conversation. So I noticed I do weird things sometimes. I look up the Forbes list whenever they release them every year. And whenever they release the CMO list, it is predominantly women. However, when they get to CEOs, CFOs, COOs, it skews more towards white male. I find that just to be really interesting, just from how you say, let's bring in the Black woman as the diversity inclusion officer. Yeah, great, but why not the CEO? That idea that it's the highest level, it's the firm, the strong, you need to have a fist down position, but you don't trust the Black woman to be there. You rather trust them to be in the, it is a level of quote unquote power, but it's not that level, which it could be for reasons X, Y, and Z. So again, not really a question, but just something that I noticed throughout the years when I looked through those lists. And I'm sure it gets worse in sports. That skewness goes more towards, again, white male, and it's almost in every category of the C-suite. But again, not really a question, more just discussion to bring up.
Yeah, that's definitely seen within sport leadership. So if you think about Power 5 conference leadership, right, that very much is white male dominated. If you look at Division II leadership, Division III leadership, you tend to see more women in general because there's less football programs, and there's a very strong prevalent belief that women can't be athletic directors of schools that have football programs, right? Which is false, and we've seen some growth in that area with the hire of the athletic director at UVA and things like that. So there are some movement in that area, but definitely seen within sport, and especially revenue sports, right? That tends to be a very big deal. I mean, even if you look at historically great women's basketball programs, they're not coached by women. They're usually coached by men. So even thinking about things like that, right? So it definitely shows up in sport in the same way.
All right. Oh, I see you, Dr. Rose, coming over. My little exercise for the day.
So my question is that, one, what drew you to understanding Black women leadership? What sort of drove you to do that? Mm-hmm. And two, and maybe I can ask it back and ask you that, should we be trying to find out why white males are so strong in not allowing room for anybody to enter their space? Because, so for that, what do Black women or women in general need to really have to sort of see what white males are looking for?
Okay, so what drew me? So yes. What drew me is very anecdotal. So during my master's program, our first class, they go around and ask what everybody wants to do, like what is their dream job in sport. And I noticed that all of the women except one said that they wanted a job that was more of like assistant, right? Except for the one woman who said she wanted to be the head athletic trainer of an NFL team. All of the men said they were going to be GMs, they were going to be athletic directors, they were going to do, but women weren't saying that, myself included. And I was very like, well, what has taught us that we can't aim that high? Like, we can't aim for an athletic director position, a head coach position. Like, what has pushed us to kind of be like, oh, well, I'll work with student athletes. And it's not like saying that work with student athletes is not enriching and important, because it is, but there's something that is telling us that is our place as opposed to running the whole department. And then the second question.
The second one really has me puzzled. Throughout history, and we've seen in leadership predominantly white males. So my question is, shouldn't we be focusing on them to see what is preventing them? What is their mindset that's preventing them from accepting other groups of people?
So I think what I think might be happening, speaking as not a white man, so, but what I think could be happening is that a lot of time whiteness is made the norm. So it's seen as the standard and what everyone experiences, what everyone has access to and sees. And so one thing we have to break is that that's not the norm, right? There are several people who have different kinds of experiences that lead and do things that don't look the same, right? So I think one, we need to break this idea of whiteness as normalcy, and I think that will start to help people to see that women, Black women, people of color in general, people with disabilities, all of those different kinds of people can be leaders once we've gotten rid of this idea of what a normal leader should be. Right, so if we have an idea of what a normal leader should be, and it is a white man, then everything else just seems, you just don't think about it that way, right? And so we need to start thinking about people in different ways.
Thank you very much. I guess more really a conversation. If you look at European patriarchy, so I'm beginning to think maybe it's not per se white males. Maybe it's really the strong patriarchal background that we are brought under. That's going to be very difficult for them to change their mindset. I'm not saying all people are like that. I'm just saying maybe that's why we see the majority. So maybe we need to really figure out how we can have a conversation across board and say what is causing each group to resist the other, and what can we do to have a transformative society where everybody can find a space they can breathe in normally.
Yeah, I think we have to start with transforming our structures and our organizations, right? Because they've been built on that standard of normalcy already, and so if you think about, for example, the workday that most of us experienced, the first people who went to work and had a workday were white men, right? So our workdays are structured around an unencumbered white male being at work. So the kind of access that your job has to you, the kind of responsibilities that you don't have to tend to at home, all of that is built around that. And so we have to start thinking about the things that we do and why we do them, and then start breaking down why that is, right? Who has been the standard for that? And do we need to change that standard so that we can include more people? Do we need to make adjustments so that more people are able to attain it? So equity, like starting to break down all of those things that we hold as, well, this is just kind of like how it is. Well, why? And then start working there.
All right. Any other questions? You have one?
Since people are sort of quiet, I cannot sneak in there and add another question or comment. So, based on my background now, being here for so long and comparatively coming from different culture, I see that United States as a society is very, very complex, because the society itself is founded on binaries, these groupings, and where women are trying to sort of enter the space where normally they were not there historically. Where you compare it to in African society, we have really where spaces were complementary. So it seems change. I guess what I'm trying to say, maybe we need to do comparative studies to see how we can help spaces be inclusive of all groups. Because you see other societies, even like Rwanda, there are more women, 2/3 in parliament, okay, making policies. A small African country, where the United States is very difficult. It has been very, very difficult for women of the United States to sort of rise up and be in power. And most of it really is grounded in everyday conversation, which from my experiences, women in everyday conversation is very difficult to enter men's spaces. And you have to have a language for which you can enter that space. So I don't know, I'm just really making a comment, maybe we can all do comparative studies and learn each other to see if we can make a little progress to be inclusive of everyone. Thank you.
And I would add to that, in terms of comparative studies, we need to definitely make sure that we are intersectional, again, with how we look at them, because to your point of women not working, that isn't true, right, for women of color and Black women. They've been working since they were brought to this country and have been in this country. So the idea of, you know, the women's movement fighting to work when there are women who are already working within, you know, caretaker roles and housekeeping roles and doing other stuff like that, we have to be sure that we are also understanding that, again, some people's, like, their intersectional experiences that are going to be different based on your race, your gender, your class, your ability status, all of those things.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So I have personally one question. So I'm interested in women's representation in sport organization leadership, but also in women's participation. One thing that I noticed on a also personal level is that oftentimes it's internalized. So when you do your research, do you come across, and you mentioned that how you actually were drawn to that research because all women said, oh, we want to be assistant, versus men saying they want to be, you know, the head of something. Mm-hmm. So have you found a lot in your research that there is a lot of internalized sexism too, and do we have to maybe change our mindset too to some extent as women and find some strategies to empower us?
So, I guess yes, yes and yes. So, I mean, of course, over time, right, microaggressions take their toll, right? So if like, let's say, as a girl, you're like, oh, I wanna try and play this, I wanna try and play that, and people are like, are you sure? Or, you know, girls don't do that, or girls don't play this, or girls do this. Over time, you start to realize that maybe this space isn't for me, right? Maybe I should think about being over here as opposed to being over there. So I think, one, we need to work on how we limit people before they even get the chance to figure out if that's even something that they can or want to do, right? We've already decided that certain people who look a certain way are better suited to do certain things. And so I don't like to take the angle that women need to change things about themselves when the society has been structured in such a way that they are told that they can't do those things. So I don't think that women are at a deficit in any way and need to make all these changes in order to be better leaders. I think we need to build spaces in which they can be thriving as leaders.
Yeah, that makes totally sense. Do you think that we need men for this, or do you think?
I mean, we need everybody. I mean, and it has to be everyone. Everyone needs to be on board with it and understand the importance of it. So yes, of course, you need white men as champions and as allies, and in that way, so that they, in a sense, that they understand that women have those qualities and can be leaders already, and they're going to do what they can with their positional power to help assist and make that happen.
I have come across some studies that men, regardless of background, there are some men out there that are very, very supportive of their daughters becoming involved in sport. And they really just transform them. Some examples from Kenya, some from actually Islamic countries like Morocco. So maybe then, just an example, just a small example, there are some men out there who really try and help their daughters to be in position of power in society.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we've seen that with social media trends lately of like girl dad, right? Talking about dads who are supportive of their daughters in all these different ways. So of course, yes, and I think that is definitely one way to help kind of bridge that gap, is having figures in your life that don't tell you that you can't do stuff, right? That you have people in your life that are constantly positively reinforcing the ideas and the thoughts and the things that you want to do, regardless of what you look like, right? In whatever space you want to be.
Yep. Yep.
So kind of playing, this is where I want the conversation to go, honestly. So talk about shifting culture, and I think here's a bigger issue. So we're talking about the black woman, so let's talk about the black family. And we're looking at the lack of father presence in black families. Fathers being incarcerated, fathers just leaving families. I don't even know if this is a question or is this just discussion I want, because I think it starts at the home. Where is the black father in the black woman's life? That's giving that support, that is saying you can do whatever you want to do whenever, divorce rates are so high and single black mothers are so prevalent. Do you think the effect of having a strong black male father figure in the home can have any influence on shifting the ideas of black women growing up to take on those higher roles in whatever sport, whatever degree, not just from a business standpoint, but being team captain or leading a team of possibly men? Again, it's more of a discussion on that.
So first, let's dispel the myth that black men aren't fathers, right? Because as lots of research has shown, that black men are some of the most present and active parents that we have, right? So one, I think we need to get rid of those kinds of myths and stereotypes that black men aren't there as fathers. Are there cases where that happens? Of course. Does it happen across race and culture? Yes, right? So one, I think we need to recognize that there are lots and lots of black fathers that are in their child's lives, period. Two, I think that having any kind of support system helps anybody get to a place of success, whatever that may look like for them, right? Having support is integral into being successful. And I lost my train of thought on where I was gonna go with that.
But basically, how it shift the society, you were saying.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And then so the shifting narratives, right? Shifting the narrative. One, I think of assuming that single-family homes are at a deficit. I think we do ourselves a disservice, particularly with black women single-family homes. I think we a lot of the times talk about broken homes and talk about how a home is already not good because there isn't a man present. And do I think a home is enhanced by having two parents present? Of course, right? But this association with broken homes being because there isn't a man there means that women are at a deficit in parenting. And I think that we have to start changing and shifting narratives in how we talk about family structures. One, because families are varied, right? So it's not necessarily always a mom and a dad or biological parents, or it can be grandparents. So thinking about shifting our narratives about what a loving and acceptable home is also, I think, will help strengthen that, right? Because if I'm being told that my home life isn't what a normal quote unquote home life should look like, then now I'm already thinking that I don't have all the tools that I need to be successful. But if I'm understanding that I'm coming from a loving and supportive home with people who care about me and want me to be successful and are doing what they can to help me get there, then I'm already ahead, right? As opposed to thinking that I'm starting from behind. So I think we need to start changing those narratives and how we talk about family. Now, incarceration, that's a separate issue and is a very prevalent issue in Black and Brown communities, and is one that, of course, also needs to be changed to kind of assist with changing that narrative.
All right, yep.
2 points. This is totally from comparative perspective. In the community that I belong, it's the entire community that raises a child. If you go out to 2 miles from home, you are told to go buy sugar and salt, and then you come around, start playing, and then you get spanked by anybody that's inside. The only saving grace is your grandmother. Any grandmother, just run and hold our leg, that's a safe space. So, compared to the United States, you have one model of family that is a predominant upper class family that you all copy. I think maybe you just stop copying upper class patriarchal families and start your own family where your community raises a child. If all you need is that child, that son and daughter, to be fully fledged citizen of the United States. Okay? Incarceration, which is you talked about, why did that happen? Where have you, basically what we need to do is study K through 12. Study stratification of K through 12 schooling in the United States. AP classes, predominantly white. Why? Okay? You need to study the teachers. You need to study property tax, where money are put in. Okay? So it's United States is so complex with issues that it needs a whole group of people to study. Not one way can be help us to explain, but starting from the community, we need to start community-based education, where a whole community raise these youngsters, where, basically where I come from, that happened. So if you start comparing a family that has everything and a family that hasn't everything, so that is really unfair comparison. So I think we need to see how is the society of the United States structured? Who benefits from the way property taxes are done in the United States? Okay? Who benefits from education, K to 12? Go through the system. People in low class level are both basically discipline issues are basically of color. Why? Have you ever asked yourself, the teachers that teach these students, are they using culturally responsive pedagogy? Okay? Or they are coming from their background. So I think it's complex, and I think for sport, that's one way we can solve the issue. Thank you.
To your point about, community child rearing, I think that happens a lot in communities of color in general, right? I know lots of people who grew up in generational homes, right, where they have a grandparent and parents and siblings and maybe another family member, right? So that if parents are at work, there's another adult in the home that is present to kind of assist. Again, I think that in America, our family structure is built on the idea of Leave It to Beaver, right? Which is 2 parents and 2 kids, and we have this, again, that idea of the whiteness as normal, and that also lends to family structure. And so, again, kind of deconstructing that, because families have always been generational and they look different. There are European families that are very generational, right, with several generations in a home. And so we need to kind of think about how to kind of, in America, get rid of this idea of what normal is, because of, that normal is different, right?
Okay, yep.
Hi. Do you think that, so often Black women get labeled as, maybe too strong sometimes, or too confident and cocky. And do you think with these negative labels that scares Black women to try and take on these higher roles because they don't want to come across as too aggressive or, too much and all of these negative things and fit that narrative that people give us? Do you think that is a fear factor and why we choose to do these, let me just take the assistant role so that way I don't seem too scary to the people that I'm over.
I think it's a combination. I mean, because their research has shown that Black women are usually penalized for being assertive, right? For being outspoken. If you look at research that talks about negotiation, right? Everyone says that you should negotiate whenever you get a job offer, right? But Black women are typically penalized for asking for more money, right? For asserting and asking questions. So I think I think it has an effect. I mean, if we look at the vice president debates from yesterday, I think Kamala Harris was very, very much dealing with that, and the fact that Mike Pence was allowed to talk over her, was given more time, and when she tried to speak up against it, she was basically chastised for that in those moments. And so, yes, she handled it gracefully, but over time, that can wear on people. And that at some point, right, which is why the idea of self-definition and self-empowerment are important within thinking about Black feminism and Black women, because there are so many messages that you are receiving from outside. So I do think it's a combination of that. Could be it for some women, and then other times, there are some women who show up and are authentically themselves, right? But structurally, because they show up that way, they aren't given promotions or they aren't allowed to grow within the space that they are in. So I think it's a combination of those things that happen at the same time.
Anyone else? Oh. Give me run for my money.
So my question is based on research. I'm just really trying to figure out how can we help young women like you in the academy when the academy is so westernized that idea of being a assertive Black woman in the academy is a no-no. You can't do that. You really cannot. And because they'll come after you in terms of people commenting on your speech. And then teacher student evaluation, telling you have an accent, the excuse they give. So you start off, let's say a white male, starting off $50,000 a year. Then push forward 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. He's going to make significantly more money than you. Because of this, it accrues. Every year, you get teacher evaluation, maybe 4.2, he gets 5 or 4.9 every year. So even though we think we need to change ourselves, it's very hard to change the academy. How are you going to survive? Do you have any strategies? For young people coming up, it's very difficult. Because you can't really say anything in there before people just give you their eyes to eat you alive in there. So how do we make for that Black woman comfortable enough, or to just survive and make money? Yeah,
I think we need to acknowledge that these spaces weren't built for people of color, right? Black people and people of color had to work to get into the academy. So we have to acknowledge that, of course, the space already doesn't feel safe, right? So we need to do a better job of creating safe spaces, so to speak, and also being inclusive and equitable. So thinking about the idea, like you mentioned, evaluations do tend to have a very negative impact on professors of color, especially Black women, right? Because they deal with the fact that their students don't want to address them properly. They deal with a lot of pushback, so students feel more comfortable telling professors of color, particularly Black women, that they're wrong, right, when they're teaching their classes. So we have to think about how does that evaluation process negatively impact people of color, to then also add in to the fact that now they're going to get further and further behind because the space isn't inclusive and the space isn't equitable. So that goes towards building and working towards having inclusive spaces right before those people are even there, and being equitable. Like, for example, one woman in my dissertation study, she spoke about how she was trying to get promoted. And she had to go through a long process of essentially proving why she needed to be promoted. So writing everything down, submitting it to the director, having him say, oh, well, yeah, I guess you do all those things and deserve the promotion. She gets the promotion, and then 4 other white men got promoted with her. Not because they necessarily deserved one, not because they had necessarily asked to get promoted, but they promoted her. So they were like, oh, well, now we need to promote them too, right? So that one minimized her work and the work that she was then asked to do to prove her worthiness for that promotion, and then creates again a non-diverse and inequitable space.
Any other questions? We have about 10 minutes left. Oh, sorry. Yep. Another question from YouTube, from a student, so let me check. So from Alexandra, are there any models that address this issue of how the privileged can be a better support to Black women in these spaces? That's a question.
So the model that I created was actually aimed at kind of working towards that. So helping to look at structurally and organizationally ways to kind of think about how to quote unquote level the playing field, right? So how to look at recruiting and hiring practices, look at the structure of the workday, look at who we automatically assume to be in power, right? And then come up with interventions and solutions to then kind of rectify or what's already existing.
Very nice. Anyone else? I don't see another question. Do you have another?
My question to you is how do we change? It comes back to being assertive as a teacher, as a faculty member, because students, at least they came to me, maybe I think because I came from a different culture, so they told me, Dr. Thompson, you know, in the United States, women are supposed to be seen and not heard. 2, your voice is too loud. It reminds me of a PE teacher. Can you be soft-spoken a little bit? So I had a contract with these young people. I said, when I go really up, just raise your hand and put your hand like this, and then I'll go down, because it's also my culture. So we had really good experiences because they'll monitor me. If I go up too high, then I'll come down. It was okay. But I'm just saying, how do we prepare young people to be able to address pedagogy?
That is a tough question. I think one way is to start by empowering young people. I think a lot of the time we as adults forget that children grow up to be adults, right? So we forget that the things that we teach them and reinforce when they are children are the things that they carry with them and bring with them into adulthood, right? So if we teach students and young people that they don't have a voice or they don't get a say in how they get to experience schooling, so to say, then they grow up and get to college or get to spaces and feel like, well, this is just how it is, so now I just do what I'm told to do, instead of kind of being critical and pushing back. I think and teaching them to be empowered, teaching them to be critical, to kind of think, to push back, right? And not in like an obnoxious way, but in a, well, I wasn't taught that, or that's not what I know. And then that brings a conversation, right? Because your experience is different than what someone else's experience is. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it should be excluded, right? So if students are empowered and able to think critically, then they're better able to kind of bring that into a space like education.
All right. Anyone else wants to share something or has a question? Nope. do we want to conclude it here? How, Dr. Salaga? Yeah, I get it. Oh, no, oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. Great presentation. Do you want to add something, Dr. Salaga? Or, oh,